The few bathymetric maps Ron was able to find showed that the depths from the Nueva beach to the opposite shore reached a maximum of about 900 feet, gently sloping, while on each side there were sheer drops to about 5,000 feet. There certainly appeared to be an underwater path which could have been traveled with the water removed. When Ron and the boys first came to Nueva, they went to the south end of the beach. There Ron found a Phoenician-style column lying in the sand near the water's edge. Examining it, he saw that there were no inscriptions still legible. Water erosion had damaged it beyond any repair. At that time, the Sinai was being occupied by the Israelis, and they were in the process of using dynamite to level part of the mountains that reached the Gulf in order to drive their tanks along the coast. Ron pointed out the fallen column to an army officer, and the next time he returned, he found they had moved it back from the beach and set it in concrete. He would later learn the significance of that lone column. He and the boys then donned their scuba gear and began to investigate what may lie beneath the waters of the crystal-clear Gulf. The biblical account told of Pharaoh's army being drowned when the parted waters rushed together, and Exodus 14:24 further tells that the Lord, quote, took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily. On the first dive, Ron found chariot wheels preserved by the coral which had attached to it. He found an axle with portions of each wheel still present, one lying flat and the other extending several feet above the ground. These chariot wheels were very difficult to see and recognize because they are covered in coral, and the portions that were not covered have disintegrated. Most wheels he found had 6 spokes. However, he found several 8-spoked wheels. He removed this one and took it to Nassif Hassan, who was then head of antiquities in Cairo. With no hesitation, he told Ron it was from the 18th dynasty. Thinking his answer a bit quick and perhaps too casual, Ron inquired how he could make such an identification upon first sight. Mr. Hassan explained that the ancient Egyptians only used the 8-spoked wheel at one time in all their history, during the 18th dynasty. In February of 1988, he found this gold 4-spoked chariot wheel in the same general area. There is no coral on the main part of the wheel because coral doesn't attach to gold, only around the hub area where some wood was exposed when it came off the chariot. While the style of this wheel is similar to that found on the walls of ancient Egyptian tombs depicting chariot making, it also bears a resemblance to ancient Assyrian chariot wheels, which also provides a very important evidence. The abundant evidence shows that there was only one period in ancient Egyptian history when 4, 6, and 8-spoked chariot wheels were used. In his article, Observations on the Evolving Chariot Wheel in the 18th Dynasty, James K. Hoffmeyer in 1976 explains that it was only at the beginning of the 18th Dynasty that the chariot comes into use in the Egyptian army. He also relates how it was only during the 18th Dynasty that the 4, 6, and 8-spoked wheels were used, and that monuments can actually be dated by the number of spokes in the wheel. Exodus 14:6. And he made ready his chariot, and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over every one of them. The Pharaoh took with him every chariot in Egypt, his own, his captains who headed the divisions, and a group called his chosen chariots, which seemed to be in addition to his regular army. There is an inscription of Ramses Meriamun that tells that he had an army of 20,000 troops, which was divided into 4 divisions. This implies that each division consisted of 5,000 troops. But many times the Pharaoh took more than just soldiers into battle. The priesthood and the military were closely associated. The Egyptian government was a combination church and state, so to speak. There were many, many gods in ancient Egypt, but the ultimate god was the one represented as the sun and known throughout the various times as Amun, Aten, and Ra or Re, among other names. It was this ultimate God that the Pharaoh was considered the earthly embodiment of. The divisions of the army were named after the gods. For example, the first army, that of Ammon, the army of Ra, the army of Ta, and the army of Sutek. When the armies set out to war, elaborate ceremonies were performed at the temples, asking the various gods to give them victory over their foes. Then booty that was gained as a result of victories was dedicated to the priesthood and temples of the deities. All military victories were directly attributed to the favor of the gods. Many times, if an upcoming battle was considered to be particularly important or difficult, the priests of the various gods would accompany the army to the battlefield in hopes that the god or gods would show special favor in their endeavors. When the Pharaoh set out after the children of Israel, he had seen the power of the true God, the great I Am, during the terrible plagues. If the Egyptian army ever needed supernatural intervention by the hands of their so-called gods, it was at this time. Since the gold-veneered chariot wheel Ron found was on the Egyptian side of the gulf, this indicates that it was at the rear of the army. A priest who is not trained in battle would most certainly be in this position at the rear.
Okay, we're out here at the beach that the Israelites came out on when they came out of the canyon system that they had been following by the leading of the cloud, and of course following Moses, who was following the cloud. And they came out on this beach and proceeded to the south, which is this direction. There was an old Egyptian fortress up to the left, Piharoth, and so they turned southward, and of course the cloud turned southward, and that was what they were following.
Soon after entering this area, the Israelites set up camp beside the sea, whose waters presented a seemingly impassable barrier before them, while on the south, a rugged mountain obstructed further progress. With all areas of escape blocked, the Israelites felt they were doomed. Suddenly they beheld in the distance the flashing armor and moving chariots, betokening the advance guard of a great army. As the force drew nearer, the hosts of Egypt were seen in full pursuit. Terror filled the hearts of Israel. Some cried unto the Lord, but far the greater part hastened to Moses with their complaints. Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. It was not an easy thing to hold the host of Israel in waiting before the Lord. Lacking discipline and self-control, they became violent and unreasonable. They expected speedily to fall into the hands of their oppressors, and their wailings and lamentations were loud and deep. The wonderful pillar of cloud had been followed as the signal of God to go forward. But now they questioned among themselves if it might not foreshadow some great calamity, for had it not led them on the wrong side of the mountain into an impassable way? Thus the angel of God appeared to their deluded minds as the harbinger of disaster. But now, as the Egyptian host approached them, expecting to make them an easy prey, the cloudy column rose majestically into the heavens, passed over the Israelites, and descended between them and the armies of Egypt. A wall of darkness interposed between the pursued and their pursuers. The Egyptians could no longer discern the camp of the Hebrews, and they were forced to halt. But as the darkness of night deepened, the wall of cloud became a great light to the Hebrews, flooding the entire encampment with the radiance of day. Then hope returned to the hearts of Israel, and Moses lifted up his voice unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they go forward. But lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thine hand over the sea, and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry land through the midst of the sea.